So far, I've looked at 3 Famicom games that were based on Nintendo arcade games. Donkey Kong was a masterpiece, both in the arcade and at home. Donkey Kong Jr. had a good gameplay concept, but couldn't quite follow through with it. And Popeye was a bit of a mess. That brings me to Mario Brothers. It was less than 3 months old when Nintendo brought it to the Famicom. Still a hot arcade game at that moment. 1983 was an inflection point for arcade games. It was the last year that single-screen arcade games were still viable. Scrolling had already started to show up in games like Xevious, and soon scrolling action games would be the norm. But in 1983, Mario Brothers was king. And it was exceptional. Mario Brothers is the second masterpiece to come from Nintendo. Over the years, it's gotten a bit lost, sandwiched in between the genre-defining Donkey Kong and the industry-defining Super Mario Brothers. And that's a shame, since it's a perfect example of early 80s arcade design done flawlessly. All of the gameplay elements combined together in Mario Brothers to make something better than the sum of their parts. The way they interact off of each other. It makes it an exceptional game. There are no boards to talk about this time. All the stages share the same layout. And in the Famicom version, there's 12 enemy patterns that loop through. Each stage follows the same pattern as monsters emerge from the pipes at the top of the screen, and Mario and his newly introduced brother Luigi have to bop them from underneath to knock them over, and then kick them off the platform. Once all the enemies have been knocked out, it's time to move on and do it again. A bonus stage occurs about every 4 levels, where the brothers race to collect pennies for extra points. It's a game that seems very simple, superficially. The devil's in the details, though, and the subtle interactions between the Mario brothers and those monsters. Let's look at the easiest one of these enemies to deal with. Kame-san, which just means turtle. In the US, they're called shell creepers, and none of them are Koopa Troopas. These turtles have the most basic pattern. They just emerge and walk in a straight line. You hit them once, and they turn over. Wait a little while, and they might turn back over. But you can see right here, if one of those turtles walks into one that's turned over, he reverses direction. Or he might get bumped into by a coin. If you ignore a monster for too long, it speeds up. And the very last monster speeds up a lot. There's strategy in how you have to bump the monsters to try to knock them forward and maybe bring them down to your level, or maybe you want to go up high to avoid something else. There's a zigzag pattern to their movement as they always emerge from the pipe above the one that they entered. That means they'll walk the opposite way that they did the previous time. So the turtles are pretty easy to deal with, but starting on the 4th stage, they start adding new enemies into the mix. The next one is Kani-san, or crabs. In the US, they're called sidesteppers. Hit these guys once underneath, and they get angry. It takes 2 blows to flip them over. But when they're angry, they also move faster. So the interactions are getting more complicated as the enemies progress. After that, in come the fighter flies, which weirdly enough have the exact same name in Japanese and in English. They bounce around the stage instead of walking, and you have to wait until they're on the ground to be able to hit them from below. The final enemy are the freezes, or slip ice in the US. These icicles just slide around the stage and sometimes stop to freeze the whole platform. This freeze effect lasts only until the end of the stage. Making your life even more difficult are the fireballs. Red fireballs just kind of randomly appear wherever, but the green fireballs appear anytime Mario lingers too long. If you wait around on a platform for a while, the green fireball will come along to force you to move. You can even beat the fireballs by bopping them from underneath, but it requires extremely precise timing. The major difference between Game A and Game B is how aggressive the fireballs are. In Game A, you might be able to wait on a platform a full 10 seconds before they show up. In Game B, you might have 3 seconds. Mario does have a weapon to deal with these enemies in the POW block that appears. Bopping it strikes all enemies currently on the ground. Fighter flies and enemies falling between platforms can avoid the effect, though. That does mean that the crabs might only become angry. And of course, if you can't get to anyone, then they'll turn over and become faster. That POW block serves a dual purpose, too. You can stand on it as a platform that the enemies will never reach. Well, almost never. The net result of all of this are a lot of game mechanics that interact in ways that are interesting. A lot of monsters emerging from the pipes means that the movement becomes more chaotic, but you've got tools that you can use to manage that. There are safe spaces to escape to, but you're always in danger of the green fireball. You've got an ultimate weapon you can use 3 times, but if you use it, you run the risk of making it more difficult as the enemies reawaken. There's a lot of risk-reward mechanics. You can manipulate enemy movements. You might hit all of the crabs once from below before you try to take them out, so that when the last one does speed up, it only requires 1 hit to take them out. It's a deeper game than you might realize, and that's before you add in Luigi. Now, unfortunately for me, I haven't been able to get anyone to help me record cooperative play in this. I had a victim lined up for a game, and they refused flat out to even try. Probably some lingering childhood trauma from playing Mario Brothers. Because while Mario Brothers is superficially a cooperative game, it never is cooperative for long. Mario and Luigi are interacting with the enemies and the stage at the same time, and they even interact with each other. You can bop the other player from below or push them around. And no matter how cooperative a game starts, it won't be long before somebody bops a monster that the other player is about to kick off, resulting in them losing a life. It's a completely brilliant design for arcade owners, where kids would put in their 100 yen coins and before long try to kill each other off rather than help each other defeat the monsters. Like the other games I've talked about so far, Mario Brothers did get a re-release with an updated label. It also got several more re-releases, but none of those came to the Famicom itself. An improved port was made very late in the NES's life, and that was released in Europe. There was a Famicom Disk System version of that, which also incorporated advertising. Mario Brothers was recreated for Super Mario Bros. 3 as a minigame. Despite its awkward jumping mechanics and goofy-looking sprites, Mario Brothers was exactly what Nintendo needed in 1983 for the Famicom. An excellent game that let 2 players go at each other. We're going to be seeing a lot more of that competitive gameplay soon.